What if I asked you a question and I said, what is an arpeggio? What would you answer? Okay. Most people would probably answer it is either they don't know, right? Or they would say it's a broken chord, or it's the notes of a triad or the notes of a chord or something like that. Or they might answer it's a sweep, it's a shred technique that only shredders use. And what I want to do today is I want to break down the myth of that. I want to explain to you, first of all, what really is an arpeggio. Okay, and I always go with the definition of broken chord. So if you don't know any theory or anything like that, it's perfectly fine. Watch this. If I just took a chord and played A minor, and I played that A minor chord, that's an arpeggio. So if you've ever strummed a guitar chord before, you've already played an arpeggio, okay? But to really make it sound like an arpeggio, what we want to do is we want to break it down by slowing down the strumming. So you get this broken sound. That's what I call it, as a broken chord. So as I play, instead of going like this, I go, and that's an arpeggio. It's as easy as that. People make it way more complicated than it has to be. And again, on your guitar journey, you can do whatever you want with this information. You can go as far as you want. But the most important thing is to understand that what an arpeggio really is just breaking down the notes slow enough so it can be heard, okay? Like if you were playing these notes on a piano, I don't play piano, but if I was playing them, instead of playing them all at the same time like this, I would break them apart by playing the notes individually. That's what an arpeggio is. Okay, so when you hear terms like sweeping and all these sorts of things, those are different techniques that you can use when you're playing arpeggios. But arpeggios do not have to be all of that, and oftentimes with many players, they're not. I love shredders like Yngwie Malmsteen or Steve Vai or Joe Satriani or whoever it might be that implement a lot of fast arpeggio stuff sometimes. But sometimes they don't. Sometimes they play them slow. But if we look at other players like, again, one of my favorites is David Gilmour. David Gilmour will use arpeggios in his playing quite frequently, but he uses them in a very melodic sense in his solos. So there's lots of different ways that we can play arpeggios. So I want to show you a couple other things here. So we've got this A minor, and we're learning to slow it down. Now you'll notice I'm adding just a little bit of palm muting to kind of separate it and make it so it's not so noisy. Okay, well, let's say we went to an A minor 6-string bar chord. Now that gives us more notes, doesn't it? Okay, so what I have to do as I'm doing this, I have to decide, well, how do I want to pick this, right? Do I want to, would that be an arpeggio? If I just push the pick through, and the answer would be yes. If I played like, that's called arpeggiating the chords. In that song, House of the Rising Sun, you're arpeggiating the chords. So you're not strumming it, you're slowing down so you can hear the click of each string as it goes. But in that situation, I'm pressing my pick through. I'm not picking it up like this. I'm sliding it through like this. And you're hearing the arpeggio happen. So when I'm on this 6-string bar chord here on A minor, if I went like this, I'm plucking each note individually, and you can hear that. If I push through, that is also an arpeggio. Okay? So the point is that what we need to understand about an arpeggio is the definition and how we're going to approach that arpeggio from a guitar perspective. Okay? So the definition of an arpeggio is really just, again, breaking a chord up so you hear the notes individually. There might be a few notes, there might be a lot of notes, but that's what an arpeggio is. Now, let's take it to the next step. Instead of just playing a chord shape, what happens sometimes is you get into a situation where maybe you have more notes that are not lined so neatly. So all of a sudden, you can't just push the pick through without moving your fingers a little bit. Let me show you this. This will be a nice little example. So let's say I went up to the note A, since we're using A minor here. If I went up to the note A on the 2nd string, which is at the 10th fret, okay? I'm going to put my middle finger on there. Now that note is A. If I go to the 8th fret of the 1st string, that note is C. And if I go to the 12th fret, that note is E. Those are the 3 notes of my triad of my A minor chord. Root, third, and fifth, A, C, and E. But because there are two notes on one string, I can't just strum through it. I have to pick through it somehow. So this is another situation where you're going to have to learn a little bit more about how to play them on the guitar. It's still a broken chord by definition, right? But we see here we can play an open chord. We see here we can play a bar chord. And we see here we can't bar anything. We have to actually move our fingers to create something. Now, of course, that can be made larger. So there's a lot of different ways of being able to play it. But right now what I want you to understand is, what is an arpeggio? So the next time you think about it when you're soloing, you can think, okay, do I want to push through the pick, right, to get an arpeggiated chord sound? Do I want to lift the pick to actually get the broken idea of each string being independent? Or do I want to create a little bit of a pattern idea on my guitar to be able to use for a melody?